Obviously, we've just gone through a period of intense racial protests about racial injustice in the United States. I'm curious about what your view of this moment is, what your view of the protests is, and what you think that Democrats should be advocating at this time to fight systemic racism in American society.
Well, let me step back for 1 second and just say, when I was running for president, I talked about structural racism in America every single day.
Yeah, you did.
And I was for reparations for Black people because I felt that it was that we absolutely cannot paper this over. We have to talk about it overtly. We have to deal with the structural impacts, and there have to be reparations for centuries of structural injustice. I'm very happy, it's terrible that the reason this came about was the murder in Minnesota by the police.
Yeah.
The reason this came about is a terribly sad reason. But the fact that it came about, in my mind, is hugely positive for the United States. I'm entirely behind these protests, this uprising. I think that it's long overdue. I think it is changing the frame that Americans across the board, Black, brown, white, red, yellow, all Americans are seeing for racial justice and a perception of structural racial injustice. I think that's hugely positive. And I think the kinds of, look, there's no way to look at inequality in the United States without talking overtly about race. And it's funny, I was having this conversation with an African-American friend, I think it was last year. And I said, we have to have this conversation, but I want you to know how awkward and uncomfortable white people feel having this conversation with African-Americans. Mm-hmm. And he looked at me and goes, Tom, just so you know, we feel really uncomfortable too. And that's true. It's a very awkward, because it's emotional and people worry about their lack of knowledge and sensitivity and offending other people and without meaning to. And that's true. And they're right. And so we're going to have to trust each other and allow each other, and particularly white people have got to be out there listening and taking in and revising their ways of thinking. Mm-hmm. And that conversation, it's not just about policy changes. I mean, when I was running, I said, look, we have to have a conversation about race, explaining how we got here so we can make the right decisions on reparations, but also so we can reframe what's going on. And this protest is a reframing for America of a race.
Yeah, absolutely.
And until we reframe it accurately, repair the damage overtly, we can't move on. And that's not just, I know African Americans have been dealing with the bulk of the pain, but white people can't move on either. Mm-hmm. As a country, we need to address the underlying systemic racism together so we can move on together.